The eternal cycle of power, war as transaction, and the illusion of change. Niccolò Machiavelli, had he been alive today, would hardly be surprised by the state of world affairs. The narratives change, the players wear different masks, but the essence of power remains immutable. It is not idealism, justice, or democracy that governs the world, but rather raw pragmatism and the perpetual consolidation of control. Those who fail to see this remain captives of illusion, believing that elections, leaders, and diplomatic gestures signify genuine change. In reality, all roads lead to the same destination: the perpetuation of war as a tool for wealth, dominion, and order. Jeffrey Sachs is correct in his assessment, but pointing out the truth is not the same as altering it. U.S. foreign policy is not dictated by morality or the shifting tides of public opinion, but by cold, calculated interests. The wars of the 21st century, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Ukraine, are not random aberrations, but logical continuations of the same design that shaped the Roman conquests, the Napoleonic campaigns, and the colonial expansions of the British Empire. War is a transaction, and behind each conflict lies a ledger, where resources, markets, and strategic advantages are tallied. The myth of leadership and the reality of the cabal. It is a folly to assume that the fate of nations changes with their rulers. Whether Trump or Biden, Bush or Obama, the decisions remain eerily consistent, not because of ideological alignment, but because the true architects of power remain unseen. The notion of a cabal is not conspiracy but historical precedent. The Medici dictated Florence's affairs while keeping up the charade of Republican governance. The Rothschilds maneuvered behind European thrones, influencing the Napoleonic Wars with their financial empire. Today, multinational corporations, defense contractors, and financial institutions dictate the trajectory of U.S. policy, ensuring that war remains an enterprise, not an accident. One must only look to history for proof. Julius Caesar's Gallic Wars were waged under the pretext of security, but in truth served the interests of Roman elites, enriching Rome while cementing Caesar's power. The British Opium Wars, disguised as economic necessity, were in reality about controlling trade and subjugating China. The Iraq War, launched under the guise of weapons of mass destruction, secured oil contracts, enriched defense contractors, and extended U.S. hegemony in the Middle East. Each war follows the same blueprint. Fear is manufactured, conflict ensues, resources are plundered, and power is consolidated. The Rothschilds and the business of war. Since the 1700s, the Rothschild banking dynasty has exemplified the true nature of war as a financial instrument. By funding both sides of conflicts, they ensured that regardless of the outcome, their influence and wealth would grow. During the Napoleonic Wars, Nathan Mayer Rothschild played a crucial role in financing the British war effort against Napoleon, while other branches of the family simultaneously managed finances in France and Austria. The most infamous example of their strategy came after the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, when Rothschild agents reportedly spread false rumors of Napoleon's victory, causing a market crash. When panic set in, they bought up British bonds at rock-bottom prices, securing vast fortunes once the truth of Napoleon's defeat emerged. This pattern repeated itself throughout history. The Rothschilds were instrumental in funding both the Crimean War and the wars that led to the unification of Germany under Bismarck. They provided loans to the British during World War I, while simultaneously profiting from arms production. The modern military-industrial complex follows the same model, where war is not about ideology, but about the balance sheets of those who finance the bloodshed. A pattern repeated across the globe. The U.S. is not alone in this Machiavellian theater. Every major power employs the same strategy. Russia's incursions into Ukraine are not about ethnic solidarity, but about securing buffer zones against NATO. China's expansion in the South China Sea is not about historical claims, but about controlling trade routes and resources. Even smaller nations, given the opportunity, engage in the same calculus. Turkey's interventions in Syria and Libya, Iran's proxy networks across the Middle East, and Israel's strategic military operations all follow the same logic of self-interest masked as necessity. What is to be done? For those who lament this reality, the answer is not blind hope in electoral politics or moral appeals. True power is never swayed by petitions or protests. It is compelled only by greater force. The Roman plebeians gained rights not through rhetoric, but through the threat of secession. The American colonies did not negotiate their freedom, but took it through war. If change is to come, it will not be through waiting for the next election cycle, but through an upheaval so great that it forces the architects of war to recalibrate their strategy. To understand power, one must abandon the illusions of benevolence and justice. War is not a failure of diplomacy, but a continuation of it by other means. Nations do not act out of conscience, but out of necessity. The cabal, whether in the form of oligarchs, financial institutions, or deep state actors, does not fear votes. It fears only the loss of control. Until such a threat materializes, the machine will keep turning, the wars will keep churning, and the people will keep believing that change is just one election away.